where ancient forces rest beneath cities and harbors, beneath the footsteps of millions who walk unknowing over one of the planet's most restless hearts. This is the Campi Flegrei. The name means burning fields in Italian. But today, it appears anything but burning. Families live here. Fishermen cast their nets into the bay. Tourists photograph Roman ruins without ever asking what lies beneath. Yet, beneath this tranquil surface, something enormous is breathing. The Campi Flegrei is not a mountain. It is a caldera, a collapsed volcanic system so vast, so powerful, that when it last erupted with full force, it altered the course of human history. 39,000 years ago, this volcano unleashed what scientists now call a super eruption. The eruption expelled more than 200 cubic kilometers of material into the atmosphere. Ash fell across continents. Sunlight dimmed, temperatures dropped. Some researchers believe it contributed to the extinction of the Neanderthals, who vanished from Europe not long after this cataclysm. But that was not the end of the story. 15,000 years later, in the year 1538, the Campi Flegrei erupted again. In a single week, a new mountain rose from the earth. Monte Nuovo New Mountain stands today as a monument to the volcano's ability to reshape the land in mere days. 24 people died in that eruption. Entire villages were buried. The coastline changed forever. And yet the people returned. They always do. This is a story shaped by time and patience. If you choose to remain with us, the Earth is about to reveal one of its quiet transformations, because the Campi Flegrei has not finished speaking. And those who listen carefully know that silence in the language of volcanoes is not the same as sleep. To understand what the Campi Flegrei is, you must first abandon the image of a volcano as a mountain. There is no cone here, no summit to climb, no single vent from which fire might pour. Instead, imagine a giant sleeping beneath a blanket of earth. The caldera stretches 13 kilometers across. Beneath it lies a vast chamber of molten rock, restless and shifting. The ground here does not simply sit still. It rises. It falls. It breathes. Scientists call this phenomenon bradyseism, from the Greek words for slow and earthquake. The land moves vertically, sometimes by several meters, over months or years. It is a movement so gradual that on any given day, you might not notice it. But over time, the evidence becomes undeniable. These columns tell the story. The Temple of Serapis, built by the Romans nearly 2,000 years ago, stands as an unlikely witness to the Earth's restlessness. 3 marble columns remain, weathered by time, but still standing. And carved into those columns at a height of several meters above the current ground level are small holes. Perfectly round, unmistakable, they were made by marine clams. Lithophaga, they are called rock-eating mollusks that bore into stone while submerged in seawater. Which means these columns, now standing in the open air, were once underwater. The temple once stood on dry land in Roman times. Then the ground sank and the sea claimed it. The columns were submerged for centuries. The clams bored their holes. And then slowly the ground rose again, lifting the columns back into the air. The boreholes remain a permanent record of the Earth's vertical journey. This is not ancient history. This is ongoing. In 1970, the ground began to rise. Slowly at first, then faster. By 1984, the town of Pozzuoli had lifted nearly 2 meters. 2 meters. In just over a decade, cracks appeared in homes, streets buckled. The harbor warped. Buildings that had stood for generations began to show structural damage. Foundations shifted. Walls separated. What had been stable for centuries suddenly was not. The Italian government had no choice. Tens of thousands of people were evacuated, not because the volcano had erupted, but because the ground beneath their feet would not stay still. Families left with whatever they could carry. Entire neighborhoods were emptied. Businesses closed. Schools shut down. The evacuations were orderly, but they were devastating. Because these were not temporary displacements. Many families stayed away for years, some never returned. The town they left behind was a ghost of itself. Empty streets, abandoned shops, buildings marked with yellow tape and warning signs. The physical damage was significant, but the social damage was worse. Communities were fractured. Generations of families who had lived in the same houses found themselves scattered across the region. Livelihoods disappeared. The fabric of daily life was torn apart. And then, just as mysteriously, the ground stopped rising. It began to settle again. By the early 1990s, people began returning. The town rebuilt. Life resumed its rhythms, markets reopened. Children returned to schools, the harbor was repaired. But the magma chamber had not disappeared. It had only paused. Today, scientists monitor the Campi Flegrei constantly. The Italian National Institute of Geophysics and Volcanology operates a sophisticated network of instruments across the caldera. Seismometers detect every tremor, recording thousands of micro-earthquakes each year, most too small to feel, but each one a signal that something is moving below. GPS stations measure ground deformation with millimeter precision. They track the rise and fall of the land in real time, creating detailed maps of how the caldera is breathing. Gas sensors sample the air continuously, analyzing the composition of gases escaping from fumaroles. Changes in carbon dioxide, sulfur dioxide, and other volcanic gases can indicate fresh magma rising from depth. Satellite radar measurements provide another layer of data, detecting ground movement across the entire caldera from space. Before we continue this story, subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us tell the true stories of Earth's most powerful volcanoes. All of this information feeds into sophisticated computer models that attempt to understand what is happening beneath the surface. Because the caldera is not dormant, it is active. It is one of the most closely watched volcanic systems on the planet. Here, in the Solfatare crater, you can see the Earth's interior exhaling. Steam rises from cracks in the ground. The air is thick with the smell of sulfur, that distinctive rotten egg odor that signals volcanic gases escaping from below. The rocks are stained yellow and white by mineral deposits. Sulfur crystals form at the edges of the vents. The ground is warm to the touch, sometimes hot enough to burn if you are not careful. Tourists walk carefully along marked paths, staying well away from the active vents. Warning signs are posted everywhere. This is not a museum. This is a living, breathing volcanic system. Bubbling mud pools dot the crater floor. Thick and gray, they release small bursts of gas with quiet rhythmic pops. The mud is heated from below, kept in constant motion by steam and gas rising through it. Romans called this place the Forum Volcani, the workshop of Vulcan, god of fire and forge. They believed the volcanic activity was the sound of Vulcan hammering weapons for the gods beneath the earth. They were not wrong. They simply lacked the language of geology. For 2,000 years, people have bathed in these thermal waters, drawn by their heat and their reputed healing properties. The Romans built elaborate bath complexes. Medieval travelers sought them out. Today, spas still operate in the region, using the naturally heated water. They have marveled at the steam, the sulfur, the warmth rising from below. But few pause to ask the question that scientists now ask every day. What happens when the breathing stops being slow? Because the ground is rising again. Not as dramatically as in the 1980s, but steadily, measurably, undeniably. Since 2005, the center of the caldera has been in a renewed phase of uplift. The movement is gradual centimeters per year rather than meters, but it is persistent. The seismographs record it, the GPS stations confirm it. The satellite data validates it. The Campi Flegrei is restless once more. And history teaches us that when the Campi Flegrei begins to rise, it is wise to pay attention. Because beneath this beauty, beneath this stillness, the Earth is preparing something. It may take years. It may take decades, but the Campi Flegrei will speak again. To understand the power of the Campi Flegrei, we must journey backward through time. 39,000 years ago, Europe was a different world. Ice sheets covered the north. Neanderthals and early modern humans shared the landscape. The climate was colder, harsher, and then, without warning, the Earth opened. The eruption that followed was catastrophic. Scientists classify it as a VA7, a super eruption, one of the largest volcanic events of the past 100,000 years. More than 200 cubic kilometers of magma exploded into the atmosphere. To put that in perspective, the eruption of Mount Vesuvius in 79 AD ejected roughly 4 cubic kilometers. The Campi Flegrei released 50 times that amount. The ash cloud spread east across Europe. Deposits have been found in Russia, more than 2,000 kilometers away. The sky darkened. Temperatures plummeted. This was not a regional disaster. It was a continental event. Archaeologists have found ash layers embedded in sediment across southern Europe. Wherever this ash appears in the geological record, there is a break of silence in the archaeological evidence. Some scientists believe this eruption may have contributed to the disappearance of Neanderthals from Europe. The timing is striking. Within a few thousand years of this event, they were gone. We cannot say with certainty that the volcano alone caused their extinction. But we know this: the eruption made survival harder, resources scarcer, the margin for error smaller. And in the contest between species, small differences matter. 15,000 years passed. The caldera remained quiet. The land healed, forests grew. Animals returned. And then humans arrived. Not the scattered hunter-gatherers of the Ice Age, but organized, settled, civilized people. The Greeks built temples here. They called the region the Phlegrean Fields and believed it was the entrance to the underworld. They were drawn by the thermal springs, the fertile volcanic soil, the protected harbors. Later, the Romans came. They built entire cities here: Puteoli, Baia, Misenum. Puteoli, today called Pozzuoli, became one of the most important ports in the Roman Empire. Emperors vacationed in Baia. Senators built villas along the coast. Cicero, Julius Caesar, Nero walked these shores. Today, much of ancient Baiae lies underwater, claimed by the same bradyseismic forces that continue to reshape this land. But the Romans knew this place was dangerous. They felt the earthquakes, they saw the steam vents, they smelled the sulfur. They called it the Forum Volcani, the workshop of Vulcan, god of fire and forge. They believed the volcanic activity was the sound of Vulcan hammering weapons for the gods. They did not understand the science, but they understood the power. And in 1538, that power returned. It began with earthquakes. Small at first, then growing stronger. The ground trembled for days. The people of Pozzuoli grew anxious. Some fled. And then, on September 29th, the earth split open. For 7 days and nights, the volcano roared. Ash and pumice rained from the sky. Flames lit the darkness. The explosions could be heard across the region. When it was over, a new mountain stood where flat land had been. Monte Nuovo rose 140 meters high, born in a single week. 24 people were killed. The village of Tripergol was buried entirely. The coastline was rewritten. It was the last eruption of the Campi Flegrei. But it was not the last time the ground moved. Because the volcano is still here, still breathing, still waiting. There is a question scientists have been asking for decades. What makes the Campi Flegrei so dangerous? The answer lies not in what it has done, but in where it sits. 3 million people live within the immediate danger zone. Naples, one of Europe's most densely populated cities, rests just beyond the caldera's edge. The towns of Pozzuoli, Bacalai, and Quarto sit directly inside it. This is not a remote volcano on an uninhabited island. This is a volcano beneath a metropolis, and it is waking up. The signs are subtle but unmistakable. Since 2005, the ground has been rising again, not dramatically, not suddenly, but steadily, measurably, undeniably. Between 2012 and 2024, the center of the caldera has lifted more than 1 meter. GPS stations record the movement in millimeters. Seismometers detect thousands of tiny earthquakes each year, most too small to feel, but each one a signal that magma is moving below. The Italian National Institute of Geophysics and Volcanology monitors the caldera around the clock. They measure ground deformation, they analyze gas emissions, they track seismic swarms, and what they see concerns them. Because the pattern is familiar. It resembles what happened in the 1970s and 1980s, when the ground rose nearly 2 meters and forced the evacuation of 40,000 people. But this time there is a crucial difference. This time the uplift is not slowing down. Scientists use a term to describe what is happening beneath the Campi Flegrei: hydrothermal pressurization. Deep below the surface, water heated by magma turns to steam. The steam expands. Pressure builds. The ground above it rises. It is a safety valve of sorts. As long as the pressure can escape gradually through fumaroles and hot springs, the system remains stable. But if the pressure builds faster than it can escape, something must give. That something could be an eruption. To understand the risk, scientists study the caldera's history. They drill into the rock, extracting cores that contain layers of ash and pumice from past eruptions. Each layer tells a story: how explosive the eruption was, how much material it ejected, how far the ash traveled. What they have learned is sobering. The Campi Flegrei has erupted at least 60 times in the past 15,000 years. Most of these eruptions were small, brief, localized events that caused little damage beyond the immediate area. But a few were catastrophic. The eruption that formed the caldera 39,000 years ago was the largest. But even some of the smaller eruptions would be devastating today. In 1538, Monte Nuovo erupted for only a week, yet it reshaped the landscape and killed 24 people. Today, a similar eruption in the same location would threaten hundreds of thousands. And scientists cannot predict when the next eruption will occur. They can monitor the warning signs. They can measure the uplift, the earthquakes, the gas emissions. They can calculate probabilities and model scenarios. But they cannot say with certainty whether the current unrest will lead to an eruption in months, years, or decades. This uncertainty creates an almost impossible dilemma. Evacuating 3 million people is not a decision made lightly. It requires time, planning, and political will. But waiting too long could be catastrophic. In 2012, the Italian government raised the alert level for the Campi Flegrei from green to yellow, a state of attention, requiring increased monitoring. It remains at yellow today. The scientists are watching. The instruments are recording. The data is accumulating. And beneath the streets of Pozzuoli, beneath the harbor, beneath the homes and schools and markets, the magma chamber is stirring. Some volcanologists believe the Campi Flegrei is entering a new phase of activity. The uplift, the earthquakes, the gas emissions all point to magma moving closer to the surface. Others urge caution. They note that the caldera has experienced unrest many times without erupting. The ground rose in the 1950s, the 1970s, the 1980s. Each time it eventually settled back down. But each time the residents of Pozzuoli wonder, is this the time? The Earth does not answer such questions quickly. It operates on a timescale we struggle to comprehend. What seems urgent to us days, months, years is merely a heartbeat to a volcano. And so the waiting continues, the monitoring continues. Life continues, because there is no other choice. You cannot move a city. You cannot turn off a volcano. You can only watch and listen and hope that when the Earth decides to speak, there will be enough warning to save those who live in its shadow. There is a particular burden that comes with living on top of a volcano. It is not the fear of imminent disaster. Most days, life in Pozzuoli feels utterly ordinary. Children go to school. Markets open. Fishermen tend their nets. The sun rises over the bay just as it has for thousands of years. But beneath that normalcy lies a question that never quite disappears. What if today is the day? The people who live here have learned to coexist with uncertainty. They have no choice. Their families have lived on this land for generations. Their livelihoods depend on it. Their memories are rooted in these streets. To leave would mean abandoning everything. And so they stay, they adapt. They learn to interpret the signs that most of us would never notice. A shopkeeper in Pozzuoli can tell you when the ground last trembled. A fisherman knows when the water in the harbor seems warmer than usual. Residents pay attention to the fumaroles, watching for changes in the steam, the smell, the intensity. They've become, in a sense, amateur volcanologists. But knowledge does not erase anxiety. If anything, it sharpens it. In the 1980s, when the ground rose nearly 2 meters, the evacuations were chaotic. Families were separated. Businesses collapsed. Entire neighborhoods were emptied. And when people were finally allowed to return, many found their homes damaged or destroyed not by an eruption, but by the ground's relentless movement. Some never came back. Those who did rebuilt their lives with the knowledge that it could happen again. And now, it is happening again. The current uplift is slower than in the 1980s, but it is persistent. Every few months, the scientists issue new measurements. The ground has risen another few centimeters. The seismic activity continues. The alert level remains yellow. And the people of Pozzuoli wait. This is the reality of living with volcanic risk. It is not dramatic, it is not cinematic. It is slow, grinding, exhausting uncertainty. You cannot evacuate a city every time the ground trembles. You cannot shut down a regional economy because scientists detect magma movement. The cost would be staggering, and there is no guarantee that an eruption would follow. But neither can you ignore the warnings. Civil protection authorities have developed emergency plans. Evacuation routes have been mapped. Shelters have been designated. The Italian government has invested millions in monitoring, equipment, and public preparedness campaigns. Yet even the best plans cannot eliminate the fundamental problem. No one knows when or if the Campi Flegrei will erupt. Volcanoes do not follow schedules. They do not provide clear timelines. They offer only probabilistic forecasts, percentages, risk assessments, educated guesses. For the people living in the shadow of the caldera, this is not enough. They want certainty. They want to know whether they should sell their homes, move their families, start over somewhere safer. But the scientists cannot give them that certainty. No one can, and so a strange equilibrium emerges. The people continue their lives. The scientists continue their monitoring. The government continues its preparations. Everyone waits for the volcano to reveal its intentions. Stories like this are not meant to be rushed. They are meant to be followed by those who still listen. If this journey resonates with you, you are already part of Fury of the Earth, because understanding volcanoes requires patience. It requires the willingness to sit with uncertainty, to accept that nature operates beyond the boundaries of human control. The Campi Flegrei will erupt again someday. Of this, scientists are certain. The caldera has been active for tens of thousands of years, and there is no reason to believe it is finished. But whether that eruption will happen next year or next century, whether it will be a minor event or a major catastrophe, these questions remain unanswered. What we do know is this: the volcano is not dormant, it is restless. And restlessness, in geological terms, is a form of communication. The ground rises, the earthquakes increase, the gases vent. Each of these is a message from the Earth's interior, a signal that something is changing. The challenge is interpreting those signals correctly. In 1980, the ground rose and thousands were evacuated. No eruption followed. Was the evacuation unnecessary? Or did the release of pressure through the uplift itself prevent an eruption? Scientists still debate this question. What is clear is that the Campi Flegrei exists in a delicate balance. It is neither fully dormant nor actively erupting. It occupies a space in between, a state of potential. And potential, by definition, is uncertain. The people of Pozzuoli have learned to live with this. They have no other option. They wake each morning not knowing whether the ground beneath them will remain still or shift again.
It is a testament to human resilience that life continues here at all.
But it is also a reminder of something we often forget. We do not control the planet we live on. We are guests here, subject to forces far older and more powerful than ourselves. The earth moves, the ground breathes, the caldera stirs. And we can only watch and wait and hope that when the volcano finally speaks, we will be ready to listen. To truly understand the Campi Flegrei, we must descend beneath the surface. Imagine standing in Pozzuoli, looking down at the cobblestones beneath your feet. Now, imagine traveling downward through the streets, through the foundations of buildings, through layers of volcanic rock and ancient ash, down through the sediment deposited by millennia of eruptions, down through the fractured bedrock, down into the heat. 5 kilometers below the surface, you would reach it. It is thick, gas-rich, and explosive. It contains dissolved water vapor, carbon dioxide, sulfur dioxide. As long as the magma remains deep underground, these gases stay trapped within the molten rock. But when the magma rises, the pressure decreases. The gases begin to escape. They form bubbles. The magma froths like champagne being uncorked. This is how explosive eruptions begin. The violence of a volcanic eruption depends largely on the viscosity of the magma and the amount of gas it contains. At the Campi Flegrei, both factors favor explosivity. When the magma rises far enough, the expanding gases shatter the rock above. The result is not a gentle outpouring of lava, but a catastrophic explosion. Ash, pumice, and volcanic bombs are hurled into the atmosphere. Pyroclastic flows, avalanches of superheated gas and rock race down the slopes at speeds exceeding 100 kilometers per hour. Nothing in their path survives. This is what happened 39,000 years ago. This is what happened in 1538. And this is what could happen again. But the Campi Flegrei is not a simple system. It does not erupt predictably. It does not follow a clear pattern. Some eruptions are massive caldera-forming events. Others are localized, brief, and relatively small. The volcano seems capable of producing almost any type of eruption, depending on factors scientists are still working to understand. One of those factors is the hydrothermal system that permeates the caldera. Rain and seawater seep down through cracks in the rock. At depth, they encounter heat from the magma chamber. The water boils, becomes steam, and rises back toward the surface. This circulation of water creates the fumaroles, the hot springs, the bubbling mud pools that characterize the landscape. It also helps regulate the pressure within the volcanic system. But the hydrothermal system is a double-edged sword. While it can release pressure gradually, it can also trap pressure if the circulation pathways become blocked. When that happens, the pressure builds until something breaks. Scientists monitor the gases that escape from the fumaroles, analyzing their composition for clues about what is happening below. An increase in carbon dioxide or sulfur dioxide can indicate fresh magma rising from depth. A change in the ratio of gases can suggest that the hydrothermal system is evolving. Every measurement, every data point, is a piece of a vast puzzle. But the puzzle is never complete. The subsurface is hidden from direct observation. Scientists cannot see the magma. They cannot watch it move in real time. They can only infer its behavior from indirect measurements. It is like trying to understand an elephant by feeling only its trunk. Yet, despite these limitations, the science has advanced dramatically in recent decades. Seismic tomography allows researchers to create three-dimensional images of the subsurface, revealing the structure of the magma chamber. Satellite radar measures ground deformation with millimeter precision. Geochemical analysis provides insights into the composition and evolution of the magma. The picture that emerges is one of a dynamic, constantly changing system. The magma chamber is not static. It is fed by molten rock rising from deeper within the Earth's mantle. It loses material through eruptions and through the slow cooling and crystallization of magma at its edges. It is alive in a geological sense. And like any living system, it is unpredictable. What scientists know with certainty is that the current unrest at the Campi Flegrei is driven by magma movement. The uplift, the earthquakes, the gas emissions all point to magma intruding into the upper crust, pushing upward, seeking pathways to the surface. Whether it will reach the surface is the question that haunts every volcanologist studying this system. Some episodes of unrest lead to eruptions. Others do not. The magma may stall at depth, cooling and solidifying before it can break through. Or it may continue rising, building pressure until the rock above can no longer contain it. The Campi Flegrei has shown both behaviors in the past. It has erupted violently. It has also subsided quietly after periods of intense unrest. Which path it will follow this time remains unknown. But the Earth is patient, it does not hurry. It does not respond to our anxieties or our timelines. It simply continues its ancient processes, indifferent to the cities and lives built upon its surface. And beneath Pozzuoli, beneath the harbor, beneath the streets where children play and merchants sell their goods, the magma waits, rising, cooling, pressurizing, releasing, breathing, always breathing, Vesuvius on August 24th. In the year 79 AD, Vesuvius erupted with catastrophic force. The Roman cities of Pompeii and Herculaneum were buried beneath ash and pyroclastic flows. Thousands died. The eruption became one of the most famous natural disasters in human history. But what many do not realize is that Vesuvius and the Campi Flegrei are part of the same volcanic system. They share the same deep source of magma. They are fed by the same geological processes. They are, in essence, siblings. And the story of Vesuvius holds lessons for understanding the Campi Flegrei. Before the eruption of 79 AD, Vesuvius had been quiet for centuries. So quiet that the Romans did not even recognize it as a volcano. They built cities on its slopes. They planted vineyards. They regarded it as just another mountain. There were warnings, of course. 17 years before the eruption, a massive earthquake struck the region. Buildings collapsed in Pompeii. The damage was extensive, but the city rebuilt. Life continued. The Romans did not connect the earthquake to volcanic activity. They had no framework for understanding such things. And then, on that August morning, the mountain exploded. The eruption column rose 30 kilometers into the sky. Ash fell like snow, burying Pompeii under several meters of pumice and debris. Pyroclastic flows swept down the slopes at hundreds of kilometers per hour, incinerating everything in their path. Herculaneum, closer to the volcano, was engulfed almost instantly. The superheated gas and ash entombed the city, preserving it in a macabre time capsule. The people had no time to escape. Many were caught in their homes. Others died fleeing toward the sea. Pliny the Younger, who witnessed the eruption from across the bay, wrote the only surviving eyewitness account. He described the darkness, the terror, the ash falling from the sky. He wrote of people tying pillows to their heads for protection, of ships unable to dock because of the debris, of his uncle, Pliny the Elder, who died trying to rescue friends trapped near the volcano. It is a harrowing account, and it is a reminder of what explosive volcanism can do. But here is what makes the story relevant to the Campi Flegrei. Vesuvius gave warning. There were earthquakes, there were signs, but the people did not know how to interpret them. They had no experience with volcanic eruptions. They did not know what was coming. Today, we have that knowledge. We have the tools to monitor volcanic activity. We have centuries of recorded history. We have evacuation plans and emergency protocols. But knowledge is not the same as certainty. The Campi Flegrei is far more complex than Vesuvius. It is larger. It has no clear summit. Its eruptions are less frequent, but potentially more devastating. And it sits beneath a modern population 50 times larger than ancient Pompeii. If the Campi Flegrei were to produce an eruption similar to the one that created Monte Nuovo in 1538, the impact would be catastrophic. Not because of the eruption's size, it would be relatively small by volcanic standards, but because of where it would occur. 3 million people live in the potential impact zone. Evacuating that many people requires days, perhaps weeks. It requires coordination across multiple government agencies. It requires public cooperation and political will. And it requires accurate forecasting. This is where the challenge becomes acute. Volcanoes do not provide clear timelines. They do not announce their intentions. The precursor signals, the earthquakes, the ground deformation, the gas emissions can continue for months or years without leading to an eruption. In 2000, Mount Yuge in Japan began showing signs of unrest. Authorities evacuated 16,000 people. The volcano erupted, but the eruption was relatively small and caused no fatalities. The evacuation was deemed a success. But evacuations are expensive. They disrupt lives. They damage economies. And if they happen repeatedly without an eruption following, public trust erodes. People stop listening to warnings. This is the paradox of volcanic hazard management. You must act before the danger is certain. But acting too soon or too often can be almost as damaging as acting too late. The scientists monitoring the Campi Flegrei are acutely aware of this. They know that their recommendations carry immense weight. They know that a false alarm could undermine future preparedness. But they also know that waiting too long could cost lives. It is an impossible balance. And so they continue to gather data. They continue to refine their models. They continue to watch for the signals that might indicate an eruption is imminent. But the truth is, even with all our technology, all our knowledge, all our experience, we cannot predict volcanic eruptions with certainty. We can only prepare. The lessons of Vesuvius are clear. Volcanoes can remain quiet for centuries and then awaken with devastating speed. The warning signs are not always obvious. And when the eruption comes, it is often faster and more violent than anyone expected. The people of Pompeii did not have the benefit of modern science. They did not have seismometers or gas sensors or satellite monitoring. They could not see the danger coming. We can. But seeing the danger and knowing when it will arrive are two very different things. The Campi Flegrei is restless. It is showing signs of unrest. The ground is rising. The earthquakes are increasing. The gases are venting. But whether this unrest will lead to an eruption, and if so, when, remains one of the most urgent unanswered questions in volcanology today. The scientists are watching. The instruments are recording. The plans are in place. And across the Bay of Naples, in the shadow of both Vesuvius and the Campi Flegrei, 3 million people go about their daily lives, trusting that if the Earth decides to speak, there will be enough warning. History suggests that trust may be misplaced, but hope is a powerful force. And sometimes it is all we have. There's a question that hangs over the Campi Flegrei like a storm cloud that will not break. When? Not if. Scientists have long accepted that the caldera will erupt again. The geological record is clear. The magma chamber is active. The system is alive, but when? This is the question that governments need answered, that civil protection agencies demand, that 3 million people living in the shadow of the caldera ask every time the ground trembles beneath their feet. And it is the one question science cannot answer. Volcanic forecasting has advanced remarkably in recent decades. We can measure ground deformation to the millimeter. We can detect earthquakes too small to feel. We can analyze gas compositions in real time. We can model magma movement through the crust, but we cannot predict eruptions with the precision that society requires. Earthquakes precede eruptions, but they also occur during periods of unrest that do not lead to eruptions. Ground deformation indicates magma movement. But magma can rise and then stall, cooling at depth without ever reaching the surface. Gas emissions increase when fresh magma enters the system, but they can also increase due to changes in the hydrothermal circulation. Every signal is ambiguous. Every measurement requires interpretation. And interpretation requires context, years of data, historical precedent, and understanding of how this particular volcano behaves. The Campi Flegrei is especially difficult to read. It does not follow the patterns of a typical stratovolcano like Mount St. Helens or Mount Fuji. It has no central conduit. Its eruptions do not come from a single vent. Instead, they can occur anywhere within the caldera, often opening new vents that did not exist before. This unpredictability makes hazard assessment extraordinarily complex. In 1982, when the ground uplift accelerated and earthquakes intensified, Italian authorities faced an agonizing decision. Should they evacuate Pozzuoli? Tens of thousands of lives were at stake. But an evacuation would cause massive economic disruption. And if no eruption followed, public trust would be shattered. They evacuated. No eruption occurred. Some praised the decision as prudent. Others criticized it as an overreaction. The debate continues to this day. Did the evacuation prevent panic that might have caused more deaths if an eruption had occurred? Or did it cause unnecessary suffering for families displaced from their homes? There is no clear answer. What is clear is that the scientists made their recommendation based on the best available data. The ground was rising faster than it ever had in recorded history. The seismic activity was intense. The signs pointed toward a possible eruption. But the volcano did not cooperate. It defied the forecasts. It rose, trembled, and then subsided without erupting. This is the nature of volcanoes. They are not machines. They do not operate on predictable schedules. They are complex natural systems influenced by countless variables, many of which we cannot measure or even identify. And yet we are asked to predict them. The current unrest at the Campi Flegrei has reignited this impossible challenge. Since 2005, the caldera has been in a renewed phase of uplift. The deformation is gradual but persistent. The seismicity is elevated. The gas emissions show changes consistent with magma movement. Every few months, the monitoring agencies release updated assessments. The alert level remains yellow, a state of attention requiring enhanced surveillance. Not green, which would indicate normalcy. Not orange, which would indicate a probable eruption within weeks. And not red, which would indicate an eruption is imminent or underway. Yellow, the color of uncertainty. This is where science meets society, and the friction is palpable. Scientists want more data, more time, more certainty before raising the alarm. Government officials want clear thresholds, actionable forecasts, definitive timelines. The public wants safety, but also normalcy, the ability to live their lives without constant fear. No one gets what they want, because the volcano does not care about human needs. It operates on its own timescale, following physical laws that care nothing for political boundaries or economic considerations. The magma rises when pressure and temperature and buoyancy align. It erupts when the overlying rock can no longer contain it. These processes unfold over days, months, years, decades. We measure them in real time, but we cannot control them. We cannot hurry them. We cannot stop them. All we can do is watch and wait and prepare. Preparation, at least, is something we can control. Emergency response plans have been developed and refined. Evacuation routes have been mapped for different eruption scenarios. Shelters have been identified. Communication systems have been established. Mock evacuations have been conducted, testing the logistics of moving hundreds of thousands of people out of harm's way. The exercises reveal bottlenecks, communication failures, gaps in planning. Each iteration improves the system. But planning is not the same as action. And action requires a trigger or decision point where the authorities commit to evacuation despite the inherent uncertainty. That decision point is defined by specific thresholds in the monitoring data: a certain rate of ground uplift, a certain frequency of earthquakes, a certain change in gas composition. But these thresholds are not magic numbers. They are educated estimates based on historical data and theoretical models. They may provide sufficient warning, or they may not. Mount Pinatubo in the Philippines gave clear warning before its massive eruption in 1991. The precursor earthquakes increased steadily over weeks. Authorities had time to evacuate. Thousands of lives were saved. But other volcanoes have erupted with little warning. Ontake in Japan erupted in 2014 with virtually no precursors, killing 57 hikers who had no time to escape. The Campi Flegrei could follow either path, or it could follow a path entirely its own. This is the reality that scientists and officials and residents must live with. The knowledge that we have learned much, but not enough. That we can monitor, but not predict. That we can prepare, but not prevent. The question of when remains unanswered. Perhaps it will remain unanswered until the moment the eruption begins, and in that moment we will learn whether all our preparation was sufficient, whether the warning signs were clear enough, whether the decisions were made in time. Until then, the waiting continues. The instruments record, the scientists analyze, the ground breathes, and 3 million people live their lives in the shadow of a question that has no answer. There is a perspective that comes with age, a recognition that some things cannot be rushed. That patience is not passivity, but wisdom. The Earth operates on a timescale that humbles us. 39,000 years ago, the Campi Flegrei erupted with a force that altered the climate of an entire continent. That eruption is a single breath in the life of this volcano. A moment in a story that spans hundreds of thousands of years. We tend to think of geological time as something abstract, incomprehensible. But standing here in Pozzuoli, looking out over the Bay of Naples, it becomes tangible. The ground beneath our feet rose from the sea. It sank back down, it rose again. The harbor that once served Roman ships now sits at a different elevation than it did 2,000 years ago. The temple columns that stood on dry land were claimed by water, then reclaimed by land. The Earth remembers all of it, and it will continue long after we are gone. This is not a fatalistic observation, it is simply the truth. Volcanoes do not exist for us. They do not arrange their activity around human schedules or human anxieties. They are expressions of the planet's internal heat, the slow cooling of a molten core, the movement of tectonic plates grinding against one another over millions of years. We are visitors in this process, brief witnesses to forces far older than our species. But we are not powerless. The people of Pozzuoli have shown remarkable resilience. They have lived through evacuations, through earthquakes, through the constant uncertainty of volcanic unrest. They have rebuilt their homes. They have maintained their communities. They have refused to be defined by fear. This, too, is part of the story. Because the Campi Flegrei is not just a geological phenomenon, it is a human story. It is about how we choose to live with risk, how we balance safety with normalcy, how we prepare for dangers we cannot predict. The scientists who monitor the caldera are not detached observers. Many of them live in Naples. They have families in the region. They understand that their work is not academic, it is personal. Every measurement they take, every model they run, every recommendation they make carries the weight of lives. They do their work with extraordinary care. They know that false alarms erode trust. They know that delayed warnings cost lives. They navigate this impossible balance every day, knowing that perfection is unattainable, and yet they persist. Because this is what we do. We study, we prepare, we adapt, we continue. The Campi Flegrei will erupt again. Of this, there is no doubt. Whether that eruption comes in our lifetimes or centuries from now, whether it is a minor event or a catastrophic one, the caldera will eventually speak. When it does, we will respond as best we can. We will evacuate if there is warning. We will rebuild if there is destruction. We will learn from what happens and improve our understanding for the next time. This is the cycle of human existence in the shadow of natural forces. It has been this way for as long as we have built cities, planted crops, called places home. We cannot control the earth, but we can choose how we live upon it. There is something profound in that choice. something that speaks to the resilience of the human spirit. We know the dangers, we understand the risks, and still we choose to stay. To build. To hope. The view from Pozzuoli at sunset is breathtaking. The bay glows with golden light. Vesuvius rises in the distance, serene and beautiful. The islands of Ischia and Procida rest on the horizon like ancient sentinels. It is easy to understand why people have been drawn to this place for thousands of years. Why the Greeks built temples here. Why the Romans constructed their most luxurious villas along these shores. Why, even today, with all our knowledge of the dangers beneath, people choose to call this home. Because beauty and danger are not opposites. They often exist in the same place, inseparable, each giving meaning to the other. The earth will continue its ancient rhythm long after we are gone. The magma will rise and cool and rise again. The ground will breathe. The caldera will sleep and wake and sleep once more. This is not a story with an ending. It is a story that continues, layer upon layer, eruption upon eruption, civilization upon civilization. We are simply the current chapter. And perhaps that is enough to witness this moment. To understand, even imperfectly, the forces that shape our world. To live with humility in the face of powers we cannot command. The Campi Flegrei teaches us this if we are willing to listen. That patience is a form of respect. That uncertainty is part of existence. That the planet does not owe us explanations or guarantees. It simply is. And we, for this brief moment in geological time, are here to observe it. The scientists will continue their monitoring. The instruments will continue recording. The plans will continue to be refined. Life will continue in Pozzuoli, in Naples, across the caldera. And beneath it all, the magma chamber will continue its slow, inexorable processes. Rising, cooling, pressurizing, waiting. The volcano is not our enemy. It is not our friend. It is simply a force of nature, following the laws of physics and chemistry that have governed this planet for billions of years. Our task is not to defeat it, but to understand it. To respect it. To live alongside it with as much wisdom as we can muster. This is the legacy of the Campi Flegrei. Not just the eruptions it has produced, but the humility it demands. The perspective it provides. The reminder that we are part of something far larger than ourselves. The planet will continue its ancient rhythm long after we are gone. If you wish to keep walking beside these powerful forces, subscribe to Fury of the Earth, and join us in the next chapter of the planet's unfolding story. Because there will always be another chapter. Another volcano. Another force of nature waiting to teach us what it means to live on a dynamic, restless, beautiful planet. The Earth is patient, and it has much more to say. We have journeyed through time and stone, through fire and memory. We have stood at the edge of one of Earth's most restless calderas, and witnessed the delicate balance between human civilization and geological forces that answer to no schedule, no plea, no warning. The Campi Flegrei remains what it has always been, a sleeping giant beneath one of Europe's most densely populated regions. 3 million lives rest upon ground that breathes, that rises and falls according to rhythms we can measure but never fully control. The scientists continue their vigil. Every earthquake is recorded. Every millimeter of ground movement is noted. Every change in gas composition is analyzed. The data accumulates day after day, year after year, building a portrait of a volcanic system that refuses to reveal its intentions. The people of Pozzuoli continue their lives. They open their shops each morning, they send their children to school. They cast their nets into the bay. They have learned to live with uncertainty because they have no other choice. This is their home, these streets hold their memories. These buildings shelter their families. And beneath it all, the magma chamber continues its ancient processes. Rising, cooling, pressurizing, waiting, we cannot say when the Campi Flegrei will erupt again. We can only say that it will. The geological record is clear. The volcano is not finished. It is merely resting between breaths. We have journeyed through time and stone, through fire and memory. We have stood at the edge of one of Earth's most restless calderas and witnessed the delicate balance between human civilization and geological forces that answer to no schedule, no plea, no warning. The Campi Flegrei remains what it has always been, a sleeping giant beneath one of Europe's most densely populated regions. 3 million lives rest upon ground that breathes. that rises and falls according to rhythms we can measure but never fully control. The scientists continue their vigil. Every earthquake is recorded. Every millimeter of ground movement is noted. Every change in gas composition is analyzed. The data accumulates day after day, year after year, building a portrait of a volcanic system that refuses to reveal its intentions. The people of Pozzuoli continue their lives. They open their shops each morning. They send their children to school. They cast their nets into the bay. They have learned to live with uncertainty because they have no other choice. This is their home. These streets hold their memories. These buildings shelter their families. And beneath it all, the magma chamber continues its ancient processes, rising, cooling, pressurizing, waiting. We cannot say when the Campi Flegrei will erupt again. We can only say that it will. The geological record is clear. The volcano is not finished. It is merely resting between breaths. When that eruption comes, whether in our time or centuries hence, it will remind us once more of a fundamental truth. We are guests on this planet. We build our cities and our lives upon forces far older and more powerful than ourselves. The Campi Flegrei is not unique in this regard. Across the globe, volcanoes sleep and wake, rise and fall, speak and fall silent. Each one carries its own story. Each one watches over communities who have chosen to live in their shadow. This is the human condition: to build, to hope, to persist in the face of dangers we cannot eliminate. The earth will outlast us all. It will continue its processes long after our cities have crumbled, long after our names have been forgotten. The magma will rise and cool and rise again. The ground will breathe. The caldera will sleep and wake in cycles measured not in human lifetimes but in geological epochs. And perhaps that perspective, that humbling reminder of our place in the vast sweep of time, is the greatest gift volcanoes offer us. They teach us patience, they teach us humility. They teach us that some forces cannot be controlled, only respected and understood. The vigil continues at the Campi Flegrei. The instruments record, the scientists watch, the people live. And the earth remembers. This is not an ending. It is a pause in a story that has been unfolding for tens of thousands of years and will continue for tens of thousands more. We have been privileged to witness this moment, to understand even imperfectly what lies beneath, to honor both the science that illuminates and the mystery that remains. The planet will continue its ancient rhythm long after we are gone. If you wish to keep walking beside these powerful forces, subscribe to Fury of the Earth, and join us in the next chapter of the planet's unfolding story. Because the Earth has more to teach us, more volcanoes to reveal, more stories written in fire and stone, and we will be here to tell them.